There we go. Nice and comfy. Let me reposition the mic too. It's optimal. Optimal bullshitting position. This book was featured on the Dar Man. I hope to God Dar did not fucking feature this book, because Dar can probably feature anything and make it absolutely cringy. So speaking of cringe, let's go ahead and get on with this. Some people will probably think this is cringy as shit, and I don't really give a rat's ass. So, title, DSP, In the Case of the Dead Whale, by Paul Werkema. Page 1. DSP in the Case of the Dead Whale. Somewhere in the basement of GTG Network and Productions, a lone intern worked tirelessly on his next segment for the Snort Report. Even though his segments hadn't been airing in close to 2 years, and it seemed to him people had forgotten about him. Or perhaps his segments just didn't work out in the overall scheme of things. Nevertheless, Diggs the intern continued to work every night to hone his craft and make his unused segments the best they could be. Oh, wow. So I guess our protagonist is Mr. Diggs. Okay. Diggs did find it odd that he had been interning here for over 2 years. No one bothered to come and check on him after he was moved to the sub-basement, where he made an office out of a storage closet. He knew this wasn't where he was going to be forever, though. The newsroom was a place of opportunity and growth. All he needed was a good story to build off of, and he would be able to get his segment back on the air. He just didn't know what he could do to add some value to one of the many stories going on in Goutopia. Is this an actual... You know what? There's probably like the other... Because the other book is about Goutopia. This is gonna be like a fucking trilogy or a fucking anthology. He could do a profile of the cult members, look into some of the more prominent members of the Snort's Topo. There were the strange figures of the antics they got into the outside of the cult, like Derek and Hallelujah He Reigns character. You remember that name? Hey guys, who remembers Hallelujah He Reigns? Each of these had been explored, and he wanted to try and add something to those stories. He was jolted out of his own thoughts when the door of his makeshift office swung open, and a man who looked like 2 people in a trench coat entered his office. This person, or people, ignored Diggs, as he asked if he could them. Really? Did we not proof this? Ignored Diggs as he asked if he could them and tossed a file on his desk. This person in a trench coat turned to leave when Diggs again asked what exactly this person wanted, and added if he didn't get the right answer, the file was going on the trash next to an empty coffee cup and the remains of a meatball sub. The person in a trench coat revealed himself to be 2 people, one of whom was in a wheelchair. What? One of whom was in a wheelchair, as the top half awkwardly spun around, nearly fell off, and face planted on Diggs' desk. While looking at whatever this was supposed to be, a few different movies went through Diggs' mind. None of them really fit. At this same gag was Dome competently in those, or at least wasn't played straight. I'm assuming he meant done. He tried to get into the minds of these 2 people and figure out why they thought this might work. Normally, it's a few children who try this, but here it looked like 2 people, close to 18, who were attempting this. As he was thinking about the 2 of them, looked to reorient themselves, and almost knocked over Diggs' heat-changing coffee cup from his desk. After reorienting itself, the top half explained it was a missing persons case from Goutopia, and they What a very progressive book. What the fuck? What am I reading? Wait, after reorienting itself, the top half explained it was a missing persons case from Gautopia, and he/they felt it was a murder. Diggs explained he was just an intern and not a police officer. The bottom half of the trenchcoat man wheeled itself under the top half, and the two were able to reorient themselves into a better situation, so they looked less like two people stacked on top of each other in a wheelchair. The top half began to beg Diggs for help as they were friends of the allegedly dead person. I'm sorry, that had an explanation point, so it should have been the top half began to beg Diggs for help as they were friends of the allegedly dead person. And they added how this wasn't a trap, which was designed to kill him and be a test run for luring other vile detractors to their deaths. Diggs raised an eyebrow and asked them if they were supposed to tell him the last part. A moment of realization came to the top half and he began to panic. A few seconds went by and the top half disappeared into the trenchcoat and a hushed conversation could be heard. Am I sure this isn't James the Lesser? I legitimately don't know. I'm so confused. Oh God, how many pages is this? Oh, thank God it's short. While this was going on, Diggs called security. They told him someone would be down there in a minute to remove the intruders. Diggs had enough time to put the phone down, reach into his lunch bag and take out his juice box, finish it, and then toss it into the garbage. He flipped through his to-do list for the day and decided that he could push some things to later in the week if this turned out to be something interesting. Because the two halves of the trenchcoat were still talking, Diggs went ahead and read the file, or attempted to read it as it was written in a combination of crayon and finger paint. From what he could gather, it contained information from an old DSP whale by the name of Emerald 7, and how his body had been found in an alley in Gautopolis, the only city in Gautopia where the honored cult members lived. Well, lived is a bit of a stretch from the reports he had read. It was more like they were trapped there by secret police of the Piglets cult. Diggs wasn't really interested in looking into this mostly because he wasn't a police officer, and partly because he had finals coming up. At least he had assumed he had finals coming up. He had been down here working for a while, so maybe he had missed finals. Either way, this wasn't a job for him, and should probably be handed over to security. Especially when Diggs turned the page and realized the majority of the document was just details about the trap he would be walking into, how they were planning on convincing him, and alternate ways to trick him into taking the case. After flipping through this, he eyed the two people in a trench coat and realized they were looking for this. The next thing he thought of was how these two cultists had given him the wrong file and were going through the real one inside their trench coat. Because he could afford to miss one segment, Diggs called up to the newsroom and told the editor he wouldn't have anything this week. The editor told him he was disappointed and expected more out of him. Then, after a short pause, asked who this was. Diggs reminded the editor who he was and how he'd been interning here for a few years now. Another short pause followed, and the editor replied with an okay and also asked why Diggs was still here since an internship doesn't last this long. With a newfound energy, Diggs assured the editor he was working on something big and would have a huge story when he got back. There was another pause from the editor. Then he commented Diggs on his work ethic and wished him luck. He also told Diggs to just see where the story goes and not to try and force something if there isn't anything there. I swear to God. Okay, dude, alright, whoever wrote this, you gotta use a little bit more intricate language than this, because I feel like I'm rereading the same thing over and over again when I go to another line and I see the same thing there. I get it. I just... Please. After hanging up the phone, Diggs jumped out of his chair, ripped off the trench coat which was concealing the two possible cultists, and asked two questions. to the two people underneath it. The more immediate one was why the top one wasn't... Wait, what? Yep, the more immediate one, I'm assuming the more immediate question, was why the top one wasn't wearing pants, and why the bottom one wasn't wearing a shirt. The two of them didn't answer, and Diggs probably didn't really want an answer. The second question was for the file they were going through, because it was the one he needed to solve the case. The two cultists' faces twisted into evil grins as they thought their scheme had borne fruit. I would assume that's bore fruit. They even congratulated each other on succeeding in their goal of tricking a detractor into falling into their trap. However, they realized Diggs was holding the other file, and their stupid plans in it, and immediately demanded to have it back. Diggs snatched the file the other file from them and walked out of the door just as security arrived and aggressively took the two cultists out of the building and called their parents to come and get them. Dude, commas. Just put some commas, because that's just one long, really long fucking sentence. While thumbing through the file he was supposed to have received, Diggs made his way to his car and entered the address of Snortbucks in the city of Gautopolis. It had taken some time, but Snortbucks had been able to expand into Gautopia. After all, the authentic Italian restaurants went out of business, despite the Beggar King's business degree and the school he set up to get all of his cultists ACE certified. It was almost like each of the restaurants was set up for failure, or they were only partly set up when the owner quit because things were getting hard. Now there was a Snortbucks on every other corner, and much of the wealth was flowing out of toxic, salted wasteland of northern Gautopia. Yeah, bust out the red pen. I'm ready to bust out the red pen. Man. As Diggs drove towards the toxic, salty deserts of northern Gautopia, he flipped through some of the pages in both files he received from the two cultists. The first file, which was supposed to be a trap, instructed him to go meet a man known as Deep Snort in a parking garage. The second file instructed the cultist to not tell Diggs this was going to be a trick, and the place he really needed to go was a movie theater next to the parking garage. This person named Deep Snort was really straight cash homie. How old is this? When's the last... Okay, guys, when's the last time straight cash homie was, like, relevant? Does he even show up to DSP streams anymore? I feel like this dude has an existence in, like, World War II. I don't... okay, whatever. That was... Okay, wait. The person named Deep Snort was really straight cash homie, who would send him on a wild pigs chase. That was if he was reading these files correctly, or if they were even accurate. It was at the point Diggs wondered why they would write this down, and why he wouldn't just go and talk to the police force in Gautopolis. Broke homie, exactly. He also chuckled at the name of the police force, as they had named themselves that... Wait, as... He also chuckled at the name of the police force as they had names themselves the Snortopo. I thought it was a snort... whatever, I shouldn't. There were a lot of things which didn't add up from reading through these two files, and the fact they were written in crayon wasn't really helping at all. There were also a few spots where finger paint had been used in place of crayons, and the paint bled through through the other pages. He had options on how he wanted to start all of this, and he quickly decided a beg berry latte would help him figure this all out. Also, he would be able to talk to someone who was an occultist, which might give him some information on all of this stupidity. And just a little bit of a heads up, if you guys can hear the fireworks, apologies in advance. I wasn't thinking that the yee ass neighbors were going to be lighting them up, but you know what? They're kind of pretty to look at out here. So, gives me something to enjoy. Let's see. Where are we? Let's see. Also, he would be able to talk to someone who wasn't a cultist, which might give him some information on all of the stupidity. The building would probably be under surveillance since all of Gautopia was basically a police state. An incompetent one, but still a police state nonetheless. It was a short drive as the boundaries of Gautopia were shrinking because of the encroachment of the Twitch sirens and the rest of the DSP critics. The sad place was being taken over and the land was being cleansed of all the toxic salt which the Beggar King had sown. All that was really left were the mountains of Wakando, Gautopolis, and part of the road which led the remains of southern Gautopia. There was also a lone sign which called for all those who passed to look upon the great works of Darkside Phil, but the only thing around it was a vast salt plain. Diggs found the parking garage, which was apparently free to use, and headed to the nearest Snortbucks. A group of cultists saw him and immediately scrambled to try and stop Diggs from leaving the parking garage without talking to Straight Cash Homie. Deep Snorts could also have been... Deep Snorts could also have been someone else if, according to the scribbles in the files, someone else came up with a better plan. This was written like one of the Beggar King's twisted conversations with himself, as he tries to keep his lies straight. Diggs ignored them. He knew what they were trying to do, mostly because he had plans, which he either wasn't supposed to have or this was part of a plan which was far too elaborate for the cult to think up. Finally, one of the cultists got in Diggs' way, forcing him to stop. The cultist seemed to have a serious dandruff problem and was LARPing at a level which made Diggs feel embarrassed on the cultist's behalf. The LARPing cultist loudly declared he was actually in charge of something called the Detractors Union, which wasn't a thing, and he was there to help Diggs destroy DSP. Diggs looked at him, put a hand on the cultist's shoulder, ushered him out of the way, and continued to walk towards Snortbucks. Oh, man. Jeez. I guess it's the Super Puppy cameo. I don't know. I guess. I can't. Oh, no, wait. No. Here it is. This didn't deter the cultist, who then told Diggs he was Super Hound and was trying to help him in his mission. It was at this moment Diggs wondered if he could just get back in his car and leave all this tomfoolery behind him. He then thought about how he could have a story if someone was going around killing the whales. He quickly came to the conclusion he didn't need Ultra Puppy or whatever his name was and continued on his way. It seemed like this entire thing was going to be bogged down with the cultists trying to stop him or possibly attempting to misdirect him. It made him wonder if everyone had to put up with things like this, or if they had discovered some way to avoid the unstoppable stupidity of the cultists. He made it into the Snortbucks, with a gaggle of cultists chasing after him, trying to get him to turn around and follow the path they had set out for him. Instead of doing this, Diggs went straight into the DIA agents citing one of the tables and asked him if they could help him out with these cultists. They asked to see some credentials. They also asked why he was still an intern, and it seemed a bit odd after verifying who he was, they called the cultist parents and made them wait in the corner until their mothers came to get them. Diggs sat down and went over where this alley where Emerald 7 was allegedly. He made it into the Snortbucks with a gaggle of cultists chasing after him, trying to get him to turn around and follow the path they set out for him. Instead of doing this, Diggs went straight to the DIA agents, citing one of the tables, and asked them if they could help him out with these cultists. They asked to see some credentials. They also asked why he was still an intern, as it seemed a bit odd, and after verifying who he was, they called the cultist parents, it's not even possessive, so he called the cultists, plural, parents, and made them wait in the corner until their mothers came to get them. Diggs sat down and went over where this alley where Emerald 7 was allegedly murdered. Allegedly murdered. Shouldn't it be the alley? It would be the alley, the alleged alley that he was murdered, because the fact is that Emerald 7 was murdered. So the allegation should be which alley was he murdered in. Presumably, anyway. Let's see. I'll turn that down just a little smidge. Unfortunately, Superhound wouldn't be deterred and rushed over to Diggs' table and started to explain the situation to him. Diggs was a bit aggravated at this point, but decided to give him another chance by continuing to ignore him. Okay? That was until he put his bony claw-like hands on him. Diggs gave a look at the DIA agents, who simply nodded in approval. He then dislocated Superhound's shoulder and left him in a heap of his own failure on the floor. And then he teleported behind him and said, "Psh, nothing personnel, kid." Because I swear to God, that should have been the next line that should have been there. The level 10 LARPer wailed. Oh my God, I was going to be pissed. Wailed in pain, as if he had been mortally wounded. Returning to his seat, Diggs ignored this and went back to his files so he could be as prepared as possible. The DIA agents walked over and lifted Superhound and returned him to the corner with all the other cultists. After comparing the two files, Diggs determined where the crime scene was, paid his bill, and gave a wink to the waitress, and was on his way. As he stepped outside, the state of the city really hit him for the first time. Looking at the roads and some of the buildings across the street, things became clear. No one was bothering or capable of taking care of the infrastructure, cleanliness, and the maintenance of the buildings. Many of the buildings were boarded up as the businesses had closed, or the homes weren't being taken care of. Diggs hadn't seen something like this before. He had heard tales from the other reporters about the state of Gautopolis, but seeing it was something very different. Looking at the squalor of this place didn't make him want to laugh. It just made him feel sad for those who had wasted all that it could have been. Instead of a city filled with riches and happy people, what sat before him was a collection or crumbling buildings, I'm assuming that's supposed to be of, each similar to one another. The streets were filled with potholes, and in those holes were puddles of foul-smelling, stagnant, yellowish water. In the gutters of either side of the broken roads, a river of chilled bacon grease mixed with toilet water flowed. The few people who traversed the dilapidated cityscape all wore similar clothes, looked as if they were the living dead, and went about this dying place as if they had no direction. There were several people trying to hand out food to the cultists, but they were being ignored because the food didn't look like the gout-inducing slop the pig roach had told them was the only good thing to eat. Each person looked like the joy had been sucked out of them. They would just collapse in the streets and wait for either the sweet release of death or the next time their bloated buffoon of a king to grace them with his presence. Then something truly stupid happened. A buzzer sounded and all of the cultists scurried out from wherever they were hiding and lined up along the streets. Diggs looked around and wondered what was going on, and where all of these kids' parents were at. He felt like he was living in a gritty, dark reboot of Peter Pan or the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Hoping it was just some creepy kid who never aged and abducted children instead of a creepy man who was coming to lead the children off to their deaths, Diggs took out his camera to record what happened. He had to because he was most likely a witness to something really creepy. Thankfully, none of his worst fears came to pass, as the only thing that came lumbering down the street was a BMW which sounded like it was in desperate need of an oil change. Based on his brief experience as a mechanic, Diggs could tell it had been about 3 years since the car's last oil change, and it also sounded like it hadn't been properly maintained. The shocks were all messed up, the tires needed to be rotated, grinding noises were coming from the front wheels, and there was a very good chance the windshield whipper, not wiper, whipper fluid was empty, almost like its owner didn't really care about the car at all. Diggs also noticed how the BMW wasn't paying any attention to the potholes and was splashing the cultists with foul-smelling water. The cultists looked like they were reveling in this, like someone was anointing them with a holy oil instead of what was probably stagnant rainwater or urine. He took this opportunity to head towards the crime scene. The alley wasn't too far from where he had been. Like much of the decrepit city, everything was close together, because the King of Gout was afraid to travel and also used his bad back as an excuse to not travel far from the Snort Fort. Also, the gout probably restricted his movement as well. Diggs walked into the dark and dusty alley to see the corpse of one of the cultists laying in the middle of it. It seemed like another trap, as it was very weird how no one bothered to move the corpse or rope off the crime scene. At least it felt this way, until Diggs remembered just where he was, and the quality of the people who lived there. Of course, they wouldn't do anything to clean up or preserve evidence of a crime. Diggs cautiously walked toward the body to make sure it was the person he believed it to be, and not just a different one who had been offed by other cultists. He knew from monitoring DSP there was a shadow war going on between the cultists as they jockeyed for the illusion of power and influence. It was kind of sad, but it was the way things were done in Goutopia. This kind of behavior was even encouraged by DSP, as a Snort father probably took some enjoyment of the fighting over him. The more Diggs thought about this, the more he wanted to throw up. Once he was close enough to the remains of this cultist, Diggs examined the body. You should have a comma there. The telltale signs were all there. The whale tattooed on the person's forehead, the badges of an open wallet and gluttonous pig were displayed on the front of the cultist robes, and of course the knife sticking out of the whale's back. This could have been Emerald 7, or it could be any one of the other people who were climbed over in a misguided quest for power. He was sure if he looked down any alley in the sad broken town, he would find a similar scene to this one. Then something on the wall caught his eye. On the wall was a piece of lined paper with what looked like the scribbles of a child struggling to learn how to write. Ironic. Diggs felt a little bad critiquing the note because the person who wrote it probably tried hard even if the execution hadn't been very good. Oh, now I'm sad. I'm legit sad. Am I reading 50 Shades of Gout? I am reading that book that's right there on the bottom left. That one. Much like the notes in the files he was given, it was also written in crayon. While he applauded the creative use of colors, the writer really needed to work on their penmanship. The person who wrote the note really used a wide variety of colors, which pointed them to using a 128 plus color pack. It took him a moment, but Diggs was able to decipher it, and he realized it was a set of instructions in case he was able to evade their first attempt to kill him. It explained how he managed to survive their elaborate and well thought out plan to lure him to the parking garage, and then he should be ushered here when they would drop a comedically large safe on his head. After reading this twice to make sure it said what he thought it said, Diggs looked up as he jumped out of the way. This wasn't really necessary though, as there was not a giant safe waiting to seriously ruin his afternoon. Instead, he saw a rope and a pulley. His eyes followed the rope down to street level, where he spotted a small piggy bank, like the one you might give to a child so they could learn about saving money. Diggs had a wave of relief followed by confusion wash over him. Clearly, he was on the right path. However, he had no idea where this path was going to take him. As he walked over and picked up a small safe. Wait, I thought it was a piggy bank. Yeah, as he walked over and picked up the small safe, he considered, wait, what? His eyes follow ropes and blah, 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 blah. A small piggy. Well, whatever. I'm going to assume he meant piggy bank. He considered what he needed to do next. Along with this, a great length, so A and then space long. With this, he wondered why the cultists thought a small plastic safe with about $7.46 inside would be enough to kill him. So far, Diggs had only uncovered more questions that while the only answer he was looking for seemed to elude him. He pulled out the files and thumbed through them until he found something which seemed like it could be the next step in the very stupid journey to uncover who had killed off Emerald 7. I mean, yeah, it is. Okay, I understand a piggy bank is basically a safe, but it's like he was talking... Dude, he was talking about a safe that was supposed to be up there and kill him. So I thought, okay, is the safe really tiny and he didn't mention it? And the piggy bank is just going to be there? And then... something... I don't know. Whatever. Diggs had a few theories so far, but nothing to really point towards any kind of answer. First, there was Swaggins. He had the most to lose. That's the most to loss. Given how he had been supplanted before by a different whale, and now his position on the porch was being threatened once again. Next was Sidella. Hey, you remember that guy? Which really doesn't need much of an explanation, as he was one of the few who revered the pig roach. Lastly, there was Only Iced Coffee, who was a strange little man who kept trying to change his name to conceal his identity. I'm sorry, activity. Okay, sorry. My bad. He hadn't ruled out the possibility these people were working together for now. Then there was the wild card of Superhound, who seemed to be LARPing at a level which was downright embarrassing. I thought he got sent home with his, to his mama. Each of these people had their own twisted motives, and the pignosis was deeply ingrained in each of them. As he was considering his next move, a thunderous snort ripped through the air. Diggs turned around to see a large number of cultists had gathered around a poorly constructed stage, and on the stage was the harbinger of ear infections himself, DSP. He was at the center of the stage, gorging himself on fast food and acting at the cultist's attempts to gain his attention. Diggs sighed as he knew that this was something he should record. But he really didn't want to do so because he was rather disturbed by the sight. He also thought there might have been other people here recording this, since the piglet liked to live stream his interactions with his cult. Knowing he had a job to do, he made his way out of the alley, not even alley, towards the gathering. They weren't far away, as it looked like they were dedicated to some kind of statue to the alleged achievements of the King of Gout. At one side of the stage was an average-looking statue of a deformed-looking parody of a human. Diggs believed it was either an abstractionist sculpture which some promise but needed to be refined if the sculptor was to truly achieve a truer vision, or it was lazily and quickly assembled blob of clay which kind of resembled an early attempt by a kindergartner who is just discovering what pottery is. We'll leave it to the reader to decide which they believe it has. Dude, don't leave it to the... We'll leave it to the reader to decide which they believe it to be, as Diggs has already made up his mind. Hoping to get more information, Diggs asked one of the cultists if he knew what was going on. The cultist, who came across as being way too excited, explained things, told Diggs this was a statue to honor those harmed during the night of the loud snorts. When the great king of hate forums was assailed by the detractors, he continued, the statue was made to resemble the beggar king, who was the one who was hurt the most according to DSP's first-hand account. None of what the cultist said made any sense to Diggs, and he pointed out how the memorial should probably have been made to remember the cultists who were harmed. This overly energetic cultist explained how this didn't make any logical sense because the king of victims was the only one who could have been harmed. The cultists continued to drone on about how their suffering was nothing when compared to the daily torment of sitting in a chair and begging, which the king of panhandling is... forced to do. Not wanting to continue this conversation any longer, Diggs thanked the cultist and gave him a shiny sticker. The cultist gazed in wonder at the stick and clutched it close to his robe so no one else could see it. Diggs left the scene and took elsewhere for clues. He started to head toward what his notes called the storage nook. According to his map, it appeared to be some kind of garage or garbage dump. I've seen the word garage too many times. Get out of here. But it might have been a building at one point, since everything looked like a garbage dump around here. Diggs was also a bit confused because the only nook he had heard of was inside of the Snort Fort, and was used to hold all of the things the King of Hoarding didn't want to get rid of for one reason or another. Regardless, he continued for a short time until he heard the unmistakable sound of a restream coming from behind him. Diggs turned and saw the piglet attempting to stand up on his hind hooves so he could address the cultists. He watched as the noodle arms of the pallid piglet worked in unison with his intense rocking to lift him up after an embarrassing level of effort. The piglet wheezed like a dying man and tightly wrapped his gnarled gouty hooves around the lectern to support his gelatinous, decrepit body. With a thunderous snort, he silenced the truly horrible effluvia which passed for music in Gautopia and launched into a pre-stream. Based on the light, honey glaze of grease on the piglet's brow, Diggs guessed the beggar king had showered within the last week. Diggs took out his recorder to capture what the piglet was saying. He was confident the piglet's deteriorated eyes wouldn't be able to see. As he was close to 40 feet away from this foul-smelling, wretched pig of a man. I don't know. The speech was mostly what one would expect. The piglet went on and on about how he was wronged by everyone, how his former employee friends had betrayed him and turned his best friend, John, against him. They resented him after he moved to northern Gautopia, after the situation in Bridgeport became too dangerous for him. DSP moved on to talk about his legacy as the best Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo player in North America on the PlayStation port of the game after most of the good players boycotted the tournament. He further explained this was because they were afraid of his greatness, and not because they felt the port wasn't true to the arcade game. None of the cultists were challenging him on anything. This was about the time Diggs made his first mistake, since making this trip to investigate an alleged murder. While the piglet was moving on to his other alleged accomplishment, Diggs burst into an uncontrollable laughter. He tried his best to muffle the sound by placing his hand over his mouth, but it just didn't seem to work at all. The cultists were turning around to look at him, and after a short time the piglet noticed what was going on. DSP unleashed a series of agitated snorts and demanded Diggs be brought before him to explain and apologize for all his insults against his swineness. Several of the cultists wheeled over to him and attempted to drag Diggs up to the stage. Unfortunately for them, none of the cultists had upper body strength. You know, it actually could have been a better story if he made this like an actual horror instead of this kind of bullshit. Like, what is that one game? It's like Outlast. Would it be Outlast? But you could just have like deranged lunatics, right? It's like it could literally be a city of deranged lunatics and like people that are like mentally deranged in handicaps trying to like rip you to shreds. This could work as a story if you made it like a horror, not like this. Let's see. Even their combined strength and the power of their electric wheelchairs weren't enough to really do anything. Finally, Diggs regained his composure and walked up to the stage, where he was met by a seriously angry but frightened piglet because of how much bigger Diggs was compared to himself. The piglet seemed to realize his mistake, but his normal tactic of running and hiding in the bathroom wouldn't work since there were too many pay pigs and cultists watching him. Diggs towered over the piglet not because he played defensive end in college, but because he stood close to 2 meters tall, about 6 feet 6 inches, or in pig math, 5 foot 18 inches. And our plump, pallid piglet was sitting down and seemed to shrink into his well-loved love seat. As Diggs closed the distance between them, the two of them finally came face to snout, with Diggs still trying to fight back his laughter at the pre-stream, which was unleashed on an unsuspecting audience. DSP's knees knocked together in fear as he meekly muttered about how he demanded apology for this interruption. As his laughter subsided, Diggs declined to make an apology because he just didn't think one was necessary, and the piglet should have thicker skin. The questioning of the piglet's paper-thin hide caused a burning, salty rage to build up inside DSP's sewer of a body. His tiny, gnarled, gout-infested hooves curled up, his noodle arms began to ready themselves for battle, and his grotesque parody of a face twisted and contorted into his try-hard gamer face. Diggs just stood there watching the scene with a look of concern on his face. Not for his own safety, but for the safety of the piglet, because it looked like he was having some kind of panic attack or seizure. He had seen something like this before when he worked as a lifeguard during his summer breaks. How many jobs has this dude had? He's been an intern for 2 years. He's working on like a finals paper. He's been a mechanic and a lifeguard. Oh wait, and he was also like a defensive lineman. Man, this dude, like, Diggs is like fucking Tom Hanks. Get out of here. Finally, after an undetermined amount of salt, rage, and gout had been built up inside the piglet, he unleashed a thunderous snort and demanded Diggs pay for besmirching his honor. This caused Diggs to fight back, another wave of hysterical laughter. The piglet demanded a battle in whatever game Diggs chose to take place, and when he lost, he would have to apologize to him and leave Goutopia forever. While this sounded like a real threat, it really wasn't, because anyone who could come and go from Goutopia as they pleased. Diggs shook his head and then agreed to it and said the game would have to be Guilty Gear X on the Dreamcast. This seemed to have caught the piglet off guard, as Diggs didn't fit the preconceived notion of what DSP believed a gamer should look like. His cultists leaped into action as the piglet was struggling to process what had just happened. The confidence radiating off of Diggs also frightened out pathetic pallid piglet. It was the same feeling of dread that whenever he was forced to pay for all the things which he stupidly boasted about on fighting games message boards, the piglet could feel the money flowing from his wallet. As the system was set up in front of the two of them, DSP looked away out of the predicament he had bumbled his way into. Diggs looked totally unconcerned about all of this as he helped the cultists set everything up, because most of them didn't know what a Dreamcast was or how to hook it up. Man. Sensing his possible defeat, the piglet looked for a possible way out, or a way to transfer the loss onto someone who was his cult, his cult would blame instead. Alright. He thought about blaming this on Tervine, but after the last several times he tried this blew up in his snout, he knew it wouldn't work. After much thought, and his grease glands going into overdrive, an idea emerged from the slurry of gout, salt, and gin which made up the piglet's brain. Okay. A rapey grin slithered across his worm-like lips, and he unleashed a mischievous snort as he loudly proclaimed it wasn't fair for Diggs to challenge him because of how good he was at every type of game. His cultists seemed to believe him, while Diggs just gave a hard eye roll and finished setting up the Dreamcast, and tested the controllers to make sure they worked. The piglet announced Diggs would have to face 3 champions of the Cult of Pig. These champions, as they were called, would be Swaggin, Sidella, and Golden Colts. Diggs, fucking Sidella, a champion. Dude, come on. There were other people that existed. Diggs looked at the piglet for a moment, wondering if he was serious, and thought about asking if he could find out who killed Emerald 7 so he could be on his way. However, this probably wasn't going to be an option, as he saw the childlike joy in Sidella's eyes as he was going to get to play a game. Something inside him didn't want to make the little racist jackass sad, because he might have to go into a rant about something or post some stupid garbage online. Deciding he could ask some questions while he was beating these alleged champions, Diggs sat down and waited for Cydella to wheel his way over. He also had to explain to Cydella how to use the controller. Oh, this is mean. This is legit mean. I disavow. I disavow. Look, I don't like Cydella, but that's... Come on, man. The first match started, and in the corner of Diggs' eye, he could see the confidence in the piglet's grotesque face drain away as Cydella went down hard in the first match. Diggs was kind of embarrassed for him, but remembered the stupid things these people would have said over the years. As he waited for the load screen to end, he asked the piglet about Emerald 7. This line of questioning frightened the piglet, as he didn't want to tell anyone about the conflicts between the whales and the shadow wars between the members of the Snortstapo. Yeah, he's changed the name. It was Snortapo last time, and now there's an ST here. So it's changed back and forth like twice. Can we be a little consistent? The second round of the match went much the same as first, with Diggs completing a double perfect. This wasn't the result Cydella or DSP wanted, as both flew into a rage. They hurled insults at him and the way he was playing the game. Both of them reiterated the same sad list of problems which the piglet used when he was exposed in fighting games. In response to this, Diggs shrugged and simply asked Cydella to kindly piss off so the next victim can receive their lesson. This response and the way it was delivered brought a hush to Cydella and caused DSP's dark side Karen form to manifest itself to defend the pig's honor. While Cydella wheeled off in shame, the piglet demanded an apology for the tone Diggs used, or he would call his manager. Diggs looked at the piglet and asked him if he really wanted to talk with his manager. In a fit of rage, DSP snorted and demanded to speak to his manager, and nothing Diggs said would change his mind. Oh, how many more pages we got of this? Where's the ending? Okay, quick break time. We're gonna see. He should be starting up the pre-stream music, because I'm probably listening to pre-stream, and then we'll just like continue the reading, and then we'll finish it up, and then we'll just watch him play whatever the fuck he's supposed to be playing today. The game that most people don't give a shit about. That game. No. DSP gaming, please. And
yeah, I'll try not to bump into the sheep when you're playing golf.
No, shut up. Great. Does he not? He doesn't even have his like live stream. Oh no, it's here.
This is coming for you.
Oof. No.
Okay.
No, so thank you. No, thank you. We're gonna have that, like, fucking put it on the side and have it very low. Well, yeah, we'll have it very low, so that way I can hear when he actually starts. Unless somebody wants to yell at me when he starts. If you want to yell at me, then I'll try and look at the chat every now and then, and we'll get an idea. Let's see. Wait. Okay. In response to this, Diggs took out his phone, scrolled through to the right number, and then dialed it. When the voice he was expecting came through the speaker, he held it up to the piglet and put it on speaker mode. The piglet seemed confused and asked what was going on. Diggs explained how DSP wanted to talk to his manager, so he went ahead and called him. The editor's voice came across the phone and asked what the piglet was complaining about this time. The piglet stumbled through his concerns about Diggs being in Galtopia, how it was damaging his legacy and his business, and finally said he didn't want him here anymore because Diggs was cheating at fighting games. There was a long pause after all of the complaints had been spewed upon from the vile sewer which was the piglet's mouth. Finally, the editor explained how he didn't care about DSP's complaint and how Diggs was doing his job. The editor hung up and the next opponent moved forward to face Diggs. I don't know. Once you're done reading this, I'm going to Summer Stream. All right, cool, man. Instead of just sitting down and playing, this person took an aggressive stance, like it was about to attack Diggs. To his credit, or possibly because he wasn't afraid of any of this, Diggs turned his back to the person and waited for him to sit down. His opponent, Golden Colts, didn't sit down. He drew his gold-painted squirt guns and opened fire, soaking the back of Diggs's shirt. This annoyed Diggs, but that was about it. He turned and took both of the squirt guns away from Golden Colts and told him to sit down and stop acting like a fool. Golden Colts did as he was told, and the fight went about the way you would expect. The first round was a bloodbath, with Diggs easily getting a perfect victory. The second was slightly more even, as Diggs was calling out moves for Golden Colts to try so the little cultist could feel like he was doing something. In the end, the second opponent was also defeated in embarrassing fashion. Oh, I can't believe I spent actual US currency for this. Oh man. Defeat was inevitable for the piglet? Was not inevitable? Did we forget a word? Even though he had been here many times before, it never made the embarrassment of it any easier for the DSP. The DSP. Okay? Did we mean to say pig? This would take him using all of his pignosis powers to eventually make the cult forget all about it. His last champion was Swaggins, and he had no faith in his ability to do anything but take abuse and give DSP all his money. The piglet tried one last-ditch attempt to distract Diggs from crushing what little reputation the piglet had left. DSP cleared his throat in an exaggerated and sickening manner as he called for a break before the final match. He declared to Diggs that they would dine on meatball subs, which he made as he was an excellent poisoner. This statement confused Diggs, as one of the three majors was in French, and the concept of fish meatballs was disturbing at best, and if they were made by the piglet, it was a revolting thought. What? Where did he say it was made of fish? What? Let's see if he started. No, he's not started. Fuck. Diggs asked if the meatballs were made out of fish, and if so, what type of fish did he make them out of? The piglet uttered an arrogant snort and said that they were made from ground beef and were authentically Italian. Diggs then asked when he used the word poisoner. Is it poisoneer? Like, oh my god, what is this word that he's using? It's like poisoner, but like poisoner. But it's not. It's like poisoneer. Oh, what is this dude saying? Is it because it was French for fish teeth? What? Yeah, I think we're reading My Immortal. I don't understand. After another arrogant snort, the piglet informed Diggs he was a complete idiot and a total moron, as poisoneer was an Italian word meaning chief. Not chef, just chief. So like he was the chief pig or something. Diggs could feel a migraine coming on and didn't even bother to argue with something which was incredibly wrong. Needless to say, Diggs passed on the meatball subs as he wasn't sure what was in them and if they were seasoned or if the piglet had washed his hands. He just waited for Swaggins to sit down and take the thrashing which was waiting for him. Like the giddy teacher's pet who was called up to the front of the class to solve math problems, Swaggins pranced up to the seat next to Diggs. However, once he saw the Dreamcast controller, his bizarre attitude turned one of dread, with a shade of terror. The piglet glared at Swaggins and muttered about how he would force him to publicly apologize to the entire cult if Swaggins lost this fight. Clearly confused by what he had in his hands, Swaggins tried to swallow his fear and began to tremble, knowing that he would have to apologize. Diggs just picked his character and waited for what he knew was going to be a clean sweep of the sorry excuse of champions the piglet has assembled. This was when something tremendously stupid happened. From the crowd of cultists, a war cry echoed out, at least as far as Diggs could describe when he heard it. When he heard it could sound like... Wait, what? From the crowd of cultists, a war cry echoed out. At least as far as Diggs could describe what he heard, it could sound like a war cry. It was only one person, and he was fairly far away, even as he was charging closer to the stage. The first thing Diggs could make out was the sadly familiar sound of Superhound's insane ramblings about the Detractors Union standing up and taking Galtopia back from the corrupt beggar king. Diggs watched as Superhound attempted to level up his LARPing ability. He started? No, he's not started. Watching him run into a super awkward way. Wait, what? Watching him run in a super awkward way. Diggs couldn't help but think how this little man should have probably launched this really pathetic attack from closer to the stage so he wouldn't have to run so far and give the piglet time to react. Unfortunately, the piglet seemed to be experiencing some of the lag which only seemed to affect him. Superhound was able to run 50 feet, climb up onto the stage, and proceed to slap DSP over and over again until the piglet bellowed about how he was blocking. Diggs could feel the headache starting to come back, so he was just focused on the game when Swaggins, which he was able to bounce back in the first match, which had started while the nonsense was going on. The really sad sounds of a slap fight were distracting Diggs a bit, but not really enough to stop him from destroying Swaggins and completing a clean sweep of the champions of Galtopia. This is Chris Chan... Dude! This is Chris Chantier writing. What am I reading? At first it was like, ha ha ha, and now I'm like, I'm hurting my brain. Like, no joke. Oh, okay. Diggs turned around to see the furor of failure and Superhound rolling around on the stage, biting each other and pulling at each other's hair. There were piles of dandruff and pools of pig grease all over the place. Looking at this and not wanting to be here anymore, Diggs decided he had enough to complete his story and noped right out of there. Well, what? But we didn't get any answers. He walked past the pod of whales and pack of pay pigs to get back to his car. They seemed to be preoccupied with the things which passed for a fight in Galtopia and didn't really pay attention to what Diggs was doing. On the way, he passed some of the abandoned businesses and apartment buildings until he found his way back to the parking garage where he had parked. The garage, while being in the same rundown state as everything else, was still very large and kind of a pain in the ass to get around in. Thankfully, there were very few cars here. While making his way through, Diggs reflected on everything. Not just what he had witnessed during this, but all of the strange events surrounding the case. He still didn't really know who killed Emerald 7, or if the body he saw was the real one. Wait. What was that all for then? Let me check on him. Good God. Okay, where the fuck were we? We were at... Let's see, the garage? Yeah, we were at the garage. The garage, while being in the same rundown state as everything else, was still very large and kind of a pain in the ass to get around in. Thankfully, there were very few cars here. While making his way through, Diggs reflected on everything. Not just what he had witnessed during this, but all of the strange events surrounding this case. He still didn't really know who killed Emerald 7, or if the body he saw was the real one. Why they lured him here was confusing at best. The two files he had kind of gave him insight into their plan as being a test run to try and kill off their other detractors. But it was so confusing and dumb, it most likely wouldn't work. Maybe they could catch one of them slipping, but it would require a miracle for them to capitalize on any mistake. As he was walking, a strange figure caught his eye. Looking at it, Diggs realized it was one of the two people stacked on top of each other from earlier. They had apparently made their way back to Galtopolis. and for whatever reason were still stacked on top of each other. But you said it was one guy. You said you realized it was... Whatever, I don't care. Or at least he assumed they were, since the figure was moving in a very awkwardly way. It was clear the bottom half was a wheelchair while the top half was too heavy and struggled to remain upright as it moved down the gentle decline of the parking garage. Hoping to avoid contact, Diggs moved towards his car so he could get out of this place and back to the studio. Unfortunately for Diggs, the top half of the figure saw him. The bottom half was most likely unable to see, which was probably causing the problems with movement they were experiencing. It called out to Diggs, addressing itself as Deep Snort. Diggs sighed, as he had hoped this was all over, only to realize there was going to be more shenanigans from the cultists. If Superhound's legion of LARPers were really part of the same cult, while Deep Snorts was making its way over to harass him, Diggs wondered what all of this was, why it was still going on, and which one of the two people coming at him was named Deep and which one was Snorts, or if they both were Deep Snort and the name was plural. Oh, it hurts. It legit hurts. Diggs sighed as his good nature took hold, and he didn't want to be rude by just hopping in his car and driving off. Also, he didn't want to back over them or run over the two of them, since the healthcare in Galtopia was non-existent at best. Deep Snorts eventually made their way close enough to Diggs so he could ask them what they wanted. For some reason, the top half was out of breath, while an audible wheezing was coming from the bottom half. It concerned Diggs, because he didn't want either of these two to die. While waiting for the top half to catch its breath, Diggs asked what they wanted and if they were going to be okay, while the two of them struggled to overcome their serious physical ailments and also their attempts to keep off the weird charade of being one person. Diggs waited for them to answer his questions. Instead of addressing either question, the top half of Deep Snorts, he didn't put a possessive there. Wait, what? The top half of Deep Snorts blurted out how Diggs needed to follow the money. Diggs asked where the two of them wanted him to follow the money to. The top half looked confused by this and just repeated how he needed to follow the money. In a slightly more annoyed tone, asked what money they wanted him to follow and where. The top half retreated into the trenchcoat, and the sound of the two of them arguing could be heard. In an attempt to mitigate the migraine which was swelling in his head, Diggs rubbed his temples and considered just hopping in his car and leaving. Can't do that, Diggs. You just said that you're a very nice guy and you don't want to do that. The sound of arguing turned into the sound of some physical altercation. This made Diggs a bit concerned because it was probably dangerous for two people to fight inside a trench coat while on top of a wheelchair. Of course, this was just an assumption backed up with some common sense because he had never heard of this exact scenario before. The weirdness continues until the bottom half's face emerges from the neck of the trench coat. The two had switched places for whatever reason. The bottom half attempted to explain that what Diggs needed to do, but he was cut off when a very angry Diggs told him to just shut up. His tone was a bit louder than he really wanted, but at this point he was really done with all of this. He told Deep Snorts how the situation already turned out that he had enough to tell a story about all this dumb stuff. The bottom of Deep Snorts looked horrified, and the top half let out a frightening shriek. Diggs asked them to get out of the way so he could leave and head back to the studio. A frightened Deep Snorts awkwardly did so, mostly because the one operating the wheelchair didn't seem to have a lot of experience during doing so, and they were still top heavy. Unfortunately, Deep Snorts collapsed behind the car and blocked Diggs from leaving yet again. For a brief moment, he thought about just backing over them, but remembered the pathetic state of healthcare in Galtopia. Diggs also didn't really want to hurt any of the cultists. Well, there were exceptions to this, but Deep Snorts were on the list of cultists who needed a smack upside the head. Thinking about this a bit longer, he cursed himself for not taking the opportunity to put the fear of God into Sidella and Swaggins. Diggs was sure he would get another chance at some point. After a few more minutes, it became clear Deep Snorts wasn't going to be moving anytime soon. They were most likely arguing over who was going to be in the wheelchair. Diggs walked around to the back of his car to see both of them tangled up in their coat. He sighed and pulled both of them and the wheelchair a few parking spots away and left them to their own devices. He got into his car and drove out of the ruins of the city. During the drive, he thought back on what happened while he was out there. What could he say about the dead whale who may or may not have been Emerald 7? Was there something new he could add to the story of the endless infighting going on in the Snort Stapo? What game was Superhound playing? Why was there the saddest looking roadblock directly in front of him? There wasn't much time for Diggs to ponder this loss. So he didn't even have a T. Right, he missed a T, so it's just LAS. There wasn't much time for Diggs to ponder this last question as his car smashed through one of the most pathetic looking roadblocks the world had ever seen. It was mostly a bunch of sticks and wouldn't be able to do anything to stop much of anything. At first, Diggs thought a tree had fallen in the road, or maybe one of the buildings had collapsed and a few bits of wood had fallen in the road. He stopped and got out to go check. Diggs immediately regretted this decision, as standing in the middle of the road like a deformed Pinocchio prototype was Superhound. He stood there surrounded by his union of detractors. Okay, he was all by himself, trying to make himself look bigger than he really was. Diggs stared at him for a moment, and then got back into his car and started driving back home again. This seemed to surprise Superhound as a look of panic crossed his face, and he started to chase the car. Diggs glanced in his rear view and chuckled to himself as the ruined city faded into the distance. That's it. That's it. That's it? What was the payoff? Wait. Is there like a page stuck? No. That's it. What the fuck? What the actual fuck? I paid actual US currency for this thing. It's good. It's good. It's gonna get burned. I'm sorry. It's getting burned. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. It's over. That's it. You're like a fart in the wind. Like, a guy went so... No, it's like the summation of the story was this intern that's been working at a news place for 2 years who is still working in the basement of the fucking news company gets a tip from 2 wheelchair symbols in a trench coat stacked on top of each other, one without pants. Did it restart? It did. Okay, OBS just had a minor hiccup. It didn't actually super die this time. But like, so it's just 2 dudes in a trench coat, and like they tell him go over here, and he goes there, and he describes about how Gautopia and the Snort Stapo control the place, and how there's really nothing there. And he goes to a Snortsbucks and like gets a Snort, I don't remember. He gets like a coffee or something, and he plays in a match of Guilty Gear X on the Sega Genesis against Swaggins, Sidella, and somebody else. I can't even remember who the last person was. And then that's it. And then he investigated the murder. He found the body. He didn't do anything else other than take a couple notes and avoid a safe falling on him. But the safe was actually really small, and it was a piggy bank, and he took it with him, and it had exactly $7.46 in it. And he went and fought Sidella and Swaggins and Golden Colts, and he won. And then he left, but before he left, he ran over a pile of sticks, and then there was Superhound, and then he just drove away. The end. That's it. I like it. Yeah, no. OBS didn't want anything else to fucking do with this. Am I going to read the other books? Well, I had the other book I ordered it. So it's coming out on Wednesday. The other book that I ordered, let me pull it up really quick, is like something about Gautopia or something. It's the DSP and the Lost Tomes of Gautopia, the Tales of Gautopia. And it's expected to arrive on Wednesday. And it was written in June of last year. But let me get a picture of it. Let me save. So the other book that I'm looking to do is going to be this book. It's also written by Paul Werkema. I don't know where he got the picture of. This looks like a very old computer. And he's pointing at a graph and it's going down. So I'm getting that one. There's 2 other books that are listed on Amazon as well. And hey, where's from his page? He has the, let's see, DSP in Through the Snorts of Madness and DSP in the Quest for the Golden Boar. I don't want to get these because these are $10 and I'm not going to spend $10 and then whatever shipping. And then possibly, dude, the delivery would be from July 27th to August 5th. Oh, dude. Oh, that's rough. But like the most, dude, no wait, the most recent one is DSP in the Quest for the Golden Boar, which was in April. And the latest one was in November, which is In Through the Snorts of Madness. The summary for that is, following his attempts to gain the lost homes of Gautopia, our poor piglet finds himself trapped in a strange place with others who seem prisoners. Many dangers are at every turn as he tries to rationalize his failure. A group of strange people appear to have been placed here to torment him and force him to face all of the things he had done to people. His mental health and ego are put to the test as he deals with a group of people who seem to be much smarter than his cultists. In his paranoid brain, he tries to rationalize what is going on, how to blame others, or how to blame this on other people. In his deteriorated mind, he tries to figure out a plan to escape and return to his home in the mountains of Wakanda. Oh, that's rough. Somebody went through the trouble of fucking reading these things. Or not reading, writing these things. I went through the trouble of reading. Okay, well, I mean, that was that. So I guess, as promised, we're going to swap over to DSP coverage.